Okay, so if it's okay with you, Laura, I think let's get started since I'm seeing the amount of people joining slowing down. So welcome everyone to the UHC Day campaign virtual letter writing workshop. My name is Eliana Monteforte. I'm the Director for Special Projects at Global Health Council, and I'm also an advisory group member of the Civil Society Engagement Mechanism of UHC 2030, which is hosting our event for today. Before I begin with my introduction, I do have a few announcements. We have simultaneous translations available in French and Spanish, and you'll see also on the screen International Sign Language. If you would like to access the translations in French and Spanish, at the very bottom of your Zoom screen, you might have to click the More button. You'll see a globe that has interpretation next to it, and you can click the globe and select that. Just one. The other thing you'll need to know is this event is being recorded, and the PowerPoint and the recording will be shared after the session. And I see a lot of people have already started doing this, which is great, but as you enter, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know your name, what organization you're from, and what country you're joining from. So I'll start my introduction by just thanking everybody who's here today to participate in this really important webinar topic. Letter writing is one of the most important advocacy tools that advocates can use to influence health policy and planning. And we've made quite a few successes with regard to universal health coverage. Our community has pushed governments to commit to universal health coverage through, for example, the most recent high-level meeting on universal health coverage, where we have a more recent political declaration. And we've also achieved some other advocacy wins, such as the recent World Health Assembly 77 passing of the social participation resolution. And it's really incumbent upon us to ensure that governments are following through with these commitments. We're also seeing a record amount of elections happening all over the world. And regardless of the results of the election, advocates and youth play a really important role in ensuring that the newly elected political parties not just follow through with their campaign commitments, but are also aware of communities' needs and the community's calls to action. I want to give you an example of how letter writing is done. And at Global Health Council, we're a member organization and we're devoted to advancing global health priorities. We do this by uniting advocates and implementers and policymakers and other stakeholders. And one of our key advocacy tools that we use are letters. And for example, collectively, we every year write a letter to the US government Office of Management Budget to provide recommendations and asks for how the US government should invest in global health. And through that collective letter, and in addition to a lot of our other advocacy, of course, we've really been able to maintain and in many cases even increase investments that the US government makes in specific areas within global health. So with this introduction, I hope you can kind of get a feel for how important and how useful letter writing can be in advocacy campaigns. So with that introduction, I'd now like to go through the agenda so you can see what's to come before we get started with our speakers. So the first part of this session will be the introduction and the opening remarks, which we have gone through. The second part will be discussing this year's Universal Health Coverage Day 2024 campaign. The campaign will be launched in October, so there's a lot more information about the campaign that's to come, but we'll give you a bit of a sneak peek today. But the main part of our webinar for today will be part 3, which is being an effective advocate and how to write a powerful letter. There will be time for discussion and question and answers. So please feel free to raise your hand when we get to that part of the session, or put your questions in the chat. We'll be tracking the questions that you're making throughout the presentation. And then we have a few links and updates to share with you in the closing. So without further ado, let's get started with our agenda. And I'm going to hand it to Nina Joshi, who is part of the UHC 2030 core team and is leading this year's UHC Day campaign. So over to Nina for a glimpse of what we have in store for this year.
Thank you so much, Eliana, and thank you, Paloma, for sharing your screen. And thank you all for being here. As mentioned, I'm Nina Joshi, and I'm part of the UHC 2030 core team, and this year I'll be leading the UHC Day campaign. In this presentation, I'll provide you all with a sneak peek into the 2024 campaign topic and tone. As already mentioned, the official UHC Day campaign is scheduled to launch on October 3rd, and that's when we'll be able to provide more details, including the slogan and graphics. So in this brief presentation, I'll provide you with some background on this year's campaign, the campaign objectives, some key moments between now and December 12th, which is UHC Day, and resources to use for your advocacy work. Next slide, please. So to back up a bit, universal health coverage, or UHC, means all people have access to the full range of health services they need, when and where they need them, without financial hardship. It has 3 main components, which are population coverage, service coverage, and financial protection. Financial protection is achieved when direct payments made to obtain health services do not expose people to financial hardship and do not threaten living standards. So in terms of UHC and financial protection, where are we today? Well, currently about 4.5 billion people, so more than half of the world's population, lack essential health services. Also, about 2 billion people experience financial hardship due to out-of-pocket health costs alone. Over the last 20 years, we have seen financial protection progressively deteriorate. For a growing number of people, out-of-pocket health costs force them to forego or delay their medical needs and results in more or longer-term sickness. These costs are forcing families to choose between paying for medicines or a visit to the doctor and other necessities, such as food and education. However, when governments reduce or eliminate out-of-pocket payments for health services and products and remove financial barriers to essential health services, we see education improve because healthy children learn better. We see gender equality increase as women and girls can better access the health services they need, and worker absenteeism declines as people's physical and mental health is better. We even see health-related poverty decrease. Next slide, please. Thank you. We know that governments do recognize the importance of achieving UHC. We saw it last year at the United Nations high-level meeting on UHC when all UN member states recommitted to achieving UHC by 2030 by adopting the 2023 political declaration. Their commitments to achieving UHC and the adoption of this political declaration included the commitment to reduce the out-of-pocket payments which lead to financial hardship and ensure financial risk protection for all throughout their life, especially for the poor and those in vulnerable situations. Given where we currently stand and the commitments governments made last year, the North Star of the 2024 UHC Day campaign will be to hold leaders accountable to the commitments they made to accelerate progress on UHC and financial protection and ensure that by 2030, everyone, everywhere is protected against catastrophic health expenditure. Next slide, please. So how do we get there? What we need from countries is for them to reduce financial barriers to essential health services, particularly for the poorest and most vulnerable, and to ensure that people's access to a core package of essential health services that are of high quality and affordable or free of charge. Next slide, please. Therefore, the focus of the 2024 UHC Day campaign will be to emphasize that accelerating progress towards UHC by 2030 is achievable, but it requires reducing financial barriers in accessing health services and protecting people from financial hardship, particularly those in vulnerable and marginalized contexts. It will also include celebrating bold actions towards UHC reforms that are made by political leaders and decision makers throughout 2024. Next slide, please. Therefore, throughout the 2024 UHC Day campaign, we will equip advocates and UHC and SDG champions like yourselves to influence decision makers, including heads of state and government, ministers of finance and health, parliamentarians, and local authorities in countries to ensure that people's access to a core package of essential health services that are high quality and affordable. We plan to do so by providing you all with messaging and advocacy tools that are evidence-based and effective, that we plan to empower advocates to be powerful agents of change, and we will leverage opportunities to build momentum towards UHC Day on December 12th. The campaign resources will include an advocacy toolkit with evidence-based messaging, social media cards, frames, banners, and backgrounds, advocacy letter templates, workshops and webinars such as this one, and recordings of past workshops so you can use them as a resource throughout the campaign. It'll also include a global heat map of national and international UHC Day campaigns and much, much more. Next slide, please. So all of this is to ultimately have political leaders and decision makers take steps to protect their populations, especially the most vulnerable and marginalized, from financial hardship and poverty as a result of out-of-pocket payments for healthcare. We want these steps that political leaders and decision makers to take to be demonstrated in their own communications efforts, in which they recognize health as a foundation for socioeconomic development, in strategic shifts in which they champion UHC throughout legislation and budgets, and in public declarations and announcements about major reforms and policy changes to drive progress towards UHC. Next slide, please. So here you can see some key moments between now and UHC Day, which is on December 12th. We'll also have a variety of workshops and events that we encourage you all to join and participate in. To stay up to date on these events and other aspects related to the campaign, we recommend that you subscribe to the UHC 2030 newsletter, the UHC Day campaign Substack, and follow UHC 2030, CSEM, and UHC Day on social media channels. Next slide, please. As a reminder, the UHC Day microsite, so uhcday.org, will be updated for the launch of the 2024 UHC Day campaign on October 3rd. It'll feature this year's new toolkit with messaging, templates, and other resources for you to use throughout the campaign. However, in the meantime, I do recommend the following resources to support your advocacy work and letter writing efforts. This includes the action agenda from the UHC movement, the political declaration from the UN high-level meeting on UHC in 2023, the UHC 2030 election advocacy guide, the State of UHC commitment synthesis report, and the World Health Assembly resolution on social participation that was adopted this year. Next slide, please. As mentioned before, to stay up to date on the campaign, I really recommend subscribing to the newsletters and the Substack, and to follow us on the social media pages that we have. Next slide, please. Thank you again, and we hope to see you on October 3rd for the launch of the campaign.
Great. Thank you so much, Nina. I see that there's already a question in the chat about the UHC social media. Any links you have regarding the UHC social media? Oh, and it looks like Laura is already on top of that. But great, Araz. If anybody else has any questions about the UHC Day campaign or anything that Nina just presented, please feel free to put it in the chat. And I know Nina and Laura and team will be happy to answer those now if you have them. So I'm now going to shift to our next presenter, which is Laura Filidor. She is the Advocacy and Communications Advisor at the Civil Society Engagement Mechanism of UHC 2030. And she will be sharing the letter writing website, which has a lot of resources and information about letter writing. Handing it over to you, Laura, with a reminder to please take your time speaking, since we have 3 translators and we want to make sure that they have time to appropriately translate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eliana, and happy to be here with you all on this call. I'm going to show you a bit more about this letter that we keep talking about since the beginning of this webinar, just showing you the website, how it works, and the information that we have. And then I will pass over to my colleague, Waiswa, for more detail on this. Please really do feel free to ask any question in the chat. We have a Q&A session just after Waiswa's presentation, when we will make some time to answer any question you might have, any remark, any suggestion, and also to hear more about what works best in your country. So without further ado, let me share with you and show you the website page when you can find the template letter in English, but also in French and in Spanish so far. So you will find a bit more information on the UHC Day 2024 campaign, but as Nina mentioned, you will have a lot more information on the microsites that will be available during the official launch of the campaign on October 3rd. We'll tell you more about that at the end of this webinar. You have a couple of clear steps on where do you start to send out a letter to your government, to your Minister of Finance, your Minister of Health, to your Member of Parliament, that you can go through. And at any stage, if you have any question, feel free to email us at the email indicated here, or also our email that we will be communicating if you need any help to contact your leaders on that subject. Just a precision, when you click on, let's check for the Spanish one, on the letter to download it, you will have just a few questions to indicate your name, email address, and your country. This is just for us. It will not be disseminated. It's just for us to have an idea of if the letter is used, where it is used, and how we can improve the use of this letter. So when you complete the download, you will have directly the letter downloaded on your computer. And then if you need any detailed instruction, you have a whole section over there with the few steps that you have here, and to identify your targets, to customize the letter, and a lot more that my colleague Waiswa, who is the coordinator of the Civil Society Engagement Mechanism for UHC 2030, will detail more. But first, I'll hand it over to you again, Eliana, for the rest of the webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for that quick overview. And also, you did a great job introducing Waiswa Nkwanga, who is the coordinator for CSEM. And he will now be going into the crux of our session today to talk about how to write a powerful letter. So over to you, Waiswa. And just a reminder to speak slowly, please. And so the translators can do their translating. Thank you.
Thanks, Eliana and Laura, for introductions. As we begin to prepare for UHC Day this year, our purpose today is to share with you the campaign plan, but also to inspire you to write letters, to reach out to your decision makers independently or in collaboration with other civil society organizations, and make sure that you build the political support that we need to advance UHC, and also demand action on the commitments that have been made. So that's really what this whole thing's about. And as the previous speakers have explained, we have commitments that have been made in the past. Last year, there was a political declaration on the UHC, and world leaders promised to do certain things to tackle the challenges of out-of-pocket spending on health and expand access to health services. So this campaign is going to focus on that, and the part about the letter writing is also going to focus on that. We want to share with you specific approaches to writing strong letters. I know that writing letters sounds easy because we all, write letters, emails all the time. But the reality is that not all letters are created equal. And we want to share with you some tips that maybe will be helpful to you as you start to do this outreach to your decision makers ahead of UHC Day on December 12th. I will start off by walking you through the key components of the advocacy letter using this format that you see on the screen that has proven to be effective. And then I'll present to you an example of our UHC Day template, letter template, using this same format. And then we will then go through some of the steps that you need to take to make your outreach effective. What do you need before? What do you need during? What do you need after you write a letter? We'll talk through all of that, and then we'll look at some of the resources that you can use to strengthen your letter to make sure it has data, it has stories that speak to the problem. It is always important, and I can't emphasize this enough, to make sure that a letter is tailored to the specific needs and conditions of your country. And we'll walk you through some of the information we have, resources we have that you can use to achieve that. So on your screen, you can see this triangle, big triangle. We call it the inverted triangle. And it's really helpful in terms of thinking about what are the key pieces that I need to make sure that I have a letter that addresses all the important aspects of advocacy, asking for something from a decision maker. So you want to start off by introducing yourself, and this gives you the opportunity to establish that legitimacy with the reader, with the decision maker, who you are, who you represent, so that they know right up front they have that information. And then you want to jump into immediately why you are writing this letter. Why are you writing to them? What do you want them, the decision maker, to do? You have to make your ask very clear and specific. And all of this, is recommended to be done in about 2 or 3 sentences maximum. Make it clear. If you need to, if you have multiple asks, use bullet points, but make sure that they are clear and that your reader can understand them. After that, you want to talk about why this is important, and how can the issue be addressed or solved. So you want to propose some solutions that can help the decision maker, the reader, really see what needs to be done. So tell them what the problem is, tell them why it's important, and why they should care. Make sure you capture those pieces. And while you're at it, you want to make sure that you are using data. Using data, current, most recent data you can have. If you don't have that, you could use personal stories that connect with what you're asking them to do. But most importantly, in this part, this is the second part here, you want to use it to inform them and illustrate the solutions, what can be done about the problem. So you want to use data, you want to use examples to show them what can be done about the problem. Now, we think that this would take about 2 to 3 paragraphs. Just make them short and to the point. The third part is to make sure that you provide the reader with the information they need. Not everybody has all the resources they need to make a decision soon about an issue on their fingertips. So you want to make sure that you offer those resources to the reader, to the decision maker. It can be in the form of links to a website. It can be attachments, but be careful with attachments because a lot of people don't want to open documents if they don't know who the sender is. They may not open the email at all. And so that's probably another paragraph there. And then you want to do something really, really important, and that is state the call to action. Remind them why it matters. Remind them what you want them to do and what kind of impact their actions will have. And then, be sure to also make them know that you are available to provide any additional information you may need. Also, it is good to offer them the opportunity for an in-person or virtual meeting with them in case they prefer that. And then obviously you want to share your details. So we're going to take, next slide, please. We're going to take this to see this box here and apply it to the letter that Laura presented to you, the letter template we've developed, and to see how this actually works in practice. Next slide, please. Okay. So here you have it on the screen. So it's a lot of text, but wanted to make sure we capture as much as we can. And we will obviously share these slides after the webinar, and you can look at this more carefully at your own time. Now, one of the things that sometimes we forget about is to make sure that when the reader opens your letter, that they know upfront what this letter is about. So making sure there's a subject there that speaks to the issue you're writing about is really important. And you want to make sure that after that you go into introducing yourself, and as I said, and also the ask that you want them to take, or the action you want them to take. So here, if you read, we read this together. On behalf of the civil society engagement mechanism, you can insert your own organization representing 1,500 members in 130 countries. We would like to request your urgent attention to the surge in health-related poverty globally. Right there, we are capturing what this issue really is about, which is also in the subject. the purpose of this letter is to ask you to champion a target set of actions to achieve the commitment to ensure financial protection for all when accessing health services, and announce these actions by UHC Day, December 12, 2024. Right there, it is clear what we're asking the decision maker to do. There are two things, and that's it.
So Waiswa, it looks like you've been muted. There you go. Go ahead again.
Okay, perfect. So then we begin to explain what the problem is. Again, this is global data, so we encourage you to use country data that connects your ask to the specific condition in your country. So here, as the previous speakers also said, according to the latest data, half of the world's population, or 4.5 billion people, do not have access to essential services, and more than 2 billion people face financial hardship due to out-of-pocket costs. This is the issue. This is what they need to know, why this is a problem. And then we go on to talk about some of the commitments that have been made before. And underneath that, we outline some of the solutions or policy actions they can take to address this issue. So in this case, on financial protection, we want them to establish and strengthen national public health insurance schemes that cover healthcare costs for the entire population. We want them to prioritize the financial protection needs of people in vulnerable and marginalized situations. And we want them to implement social protection interventions like cash transfers where necessary to cover all costs related to health and well-being. So right there, we have specific things that we are proposing to them, steps that they can take in their own countries. And maybe they have two or one or some of them, but maybe they don't. And they have to look at this and see what they can do differently. So then when we move down, when you go down, you see that in this section, we are sharing information about some of the other commitments that have been made. In this case, we call on them to implement the World Health Assembly Resolution on Social Participation for Universal Health Coverage and Health and Well-being. And we also want them to take a look at the action agenda from the UHC movement for further information and concrete actions that they can take. So we have these resources that we are offering to them for their own reference so that they can figure out what they need to do. And then we conclude by thanking them, but also making sure that we make ourselves available to discuss any actions they can take. And we share our information, our contact information, our email, and just to reiterate that this letter template is available to download in English, French, and Spanish on our website. Next slide, please. Actually, before next slide, I want to point out one thing, if you go back here 1 second, which is that the one thing you don't want to do, or a couple of things. One is that you don't send a letter without a clear ask. If you don't have a clear ask, you need to do more research about your issue and what you want them to do. Do not send a letter. If you also don't have data, make sure you at least find very relevant personal or other experiences of your community that you can use to support your claims. And be sure, always make sure, don't forget about this, that you need to suggest some solutions, some steps that can be taken to address the problem. Next slide. Okay, so we have looked at the letter, we've looked at the format. Let's look at some of the steps, effective steps that you can take for outreach. It is critically important that before you do write the letter, or as you're writing it, that you do enough research on the person, the policymaker that you're trying to target. So you want to understand what their role is. You want to understand if they are, let's say, in a ministry, what issues their role actually covers. You want, if they're elected officials, you want to look at their positions in the legislature. Maybe they sit on a committee for, let's say, budget. You want to understand that. You want to look at their voting records to know if they are completely opposed to the issue, if they actually support the issue, if they have supported the issue, because this information helps you tailor your letter to them specifically. And then you want to try to make it personal as you can, meaning as you're doing your research, look at some of the experiences. There might be some experiences, personal or family members that they may have talked about that experience a problem that's similar to what you're trying to ask them to address, and connect that in a personal way. But you have to be careful with that, so that people sometimes are not can be sensitive on certain issues, but you want to understand all of that. Then you want, after you've done that, you want to identify a way, the best and most effective way to reach them. So a lot of offices, government offices, other offices have a standard format for email, for other things. And so you want, if you can't really find their email on a website or someplace, you can look at how others' emails are formatted and try to emulate that and see if it works. You want to identify the key staff members and copy them to email, because if it's a minister, whoever, they may not actually be reading the email themselves, but instead the staff members might be reading that email. But also you want to make sure that you're looping in more people that can remind them, even if they saw the email, they may forget about it, and they can remind them about it. And I have heard that that in some countries, if something is sent to like a department email or to a decision maker, that they are required to, like, the staff members are required to flag that correspondence and to make sure that there is a response to it from the intended, let's say, minister. And so you might want to make sure that if there's an email for the department, government department, they also copy it. You want to increase your visibility as well that way, so that if one person does not see it, another person sees it. You want to tailor your letter to the person you're addressing it. So if they have played a leadership role, for example, in the past on an issue, you want to come in and thank them for the work they've done for championing the issue, so that they see that you see their work and their contribution to the issue, and then go into asking them the specific things you want them to do. You want also to make sure that you offer to meet them in person. I mean, even if you don't exactly mean it, you want to make that option available to them in case they want to, and can be virtual as well. But make sure it's there. Give them the opportunity to choose that. But also it helps you if they say yes to, if you have that meeting with them, to establish that connection with them one-on-one. And when you meet with them, ask questions, because in some countries, decision makers are required to respond to those, to provide some responses to your questions. And the African proverb goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. In other words, it's always great to have other CSOs, other, community members join efforts hands with you on this letter and have them co-sign that letter. It shows in the community, it shows that this is a bigger problem than just one person's problem. And so it increases the chances of them taking it seriously, but also amplifying it by different actors in the group. Next slide, please. Now, with advocacy, we write letters, we send them, we never hear back, anything like that, and it can be frustrating, but following up after sending an advocacy letter to your decision maker is really, really important. And you want to make sure that it has reached the right person, the right decision maker, and that they're acting on it or not. Sorry, I had anyway. So you want to follow up in, we say maybe in 2 to 3 weeks. You don't want to send a letter today and tomorrow you're starting to follow up. People need time, give them some time to respond before you follow up. You want to try to use different channels to communicate. So email, you can do a phone call if you need to. You want to request, meeting with them. You want, if you can, use social media as well and tag them in on key pieces that you want them to pay attention to. You want to engage their staff, the key staff members. Every country has its own structure, but in some places they have aides and advisors that really control what the decision maker really says. And so you want to engage them as well and build that relationship. Sometimes those are the only people you can actually reach. And so they're the ones that will get your message to the intended audience. So you want to engage them. You want to also, and I advise this to be a little bit, to apply some kind of caution here, to leverage public support, meaning putting your issue out there. But, some people can take it differently. Some decision makers can take that differently. They may think you are putting them on the spot. You are trying to ruin their reputation. So you have to really apply your discretion on when to do that, but it can also be helpful. You want to, if you hear about a public event happening where the decision maker you're trying to reach is going to be, you want to go there and maybe try to access them there as well to raise your issue. As you're doing all of this, you really want to make sure that you're not pissing people off. So you have to be respectful and also persistent. Can we get to the next slide, please? Okay, so you've done all of that, or you're doing all of that. You need to make sure that your information, your letter is supported with data, relevant, accurate, recent data, not something from the last century. And so here, what we're trying to do here is to encourage everybody to use data to customize their letters. So these are some of the resources that you can use that we've put together. The Global Monitoring Report is published every 2 years by the World Bank and the World Health Organization, and it tracks 2 indicators on service coverage and also financial hardship or due to out-of-pocket payments for health services. And so you can get some of the data from there that you can use to put in to tailor your letter. We don't, I'm not quite sure, maybe somebody on this call can clarify on this, if there are country-specific data published. I'm not quite sure, I haven't seen it, but you also have other resources that you could use to find more country-specific data, including the State of UHC Commitment Review that is published by UHC 2030. We've been doing this every year, but I think we are restructuring a little bit, so we'll communicate this in terms of frequency. And within that State of UHC Commitment Review, there's some really useful information there, or tools, including the UHC data portal and the UHC country data dashboard. And this one has data on about 140 or so countries that have been obtained from different sources, including civil society. And so that can be helpful. You can sort out, when you're on there, you can actually sort out by country. You plug in your country, and it looks at the commitment areas from the UHC action agenda, and sorts it out for you on financial hardship, on other things. And then you can take that information and plug it into your letter and use that as evidence. And also, I know that actors are developing tools at the regional level, at country level, and so you want also to use that data if you have access to it. And next slide. Okay, so I'll stop there, and I will come back to you, Aliana.
Thank you, Waiswa. That was very comprehensive, and you gave us a lot to think about, a lot of great resources that I think people really appreciate. If you all have any questions, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen. I don't see any questions now, but I did want to just make a few comments and suggestions based on our experience at Global Health Council that weren't mentioned in the presentation. First, I just want to remind everyone how important timing is. You really have to get to know the calendar for your government and the processes for how they pass policy. And you want to make sure that you're timing your letters correctly. So, for example, I mentioned earlier in my introduction that at Global Health Council, we often write letters every year, or a letter to the Office Management Budget, to provide recommendations and calls for how the US government should invest in global health and in all the different disease areas and initiatives in global health. So there is an actual season within the US government where Congress actually discusses the budget, and there's an entire process for how the budget is developed and how it's passed within Congress and then is eventually enacted. So you need to make sure that you're timing your letter at the specific time in the process where you can actually make an influence or an impact. You obviously don't want to time your letter when you're at the part of the process where things have already been passed or about to be enacted. You want to make sure that the letter is received at a time when your congressmen or parliament have time to actually take those inputs and recommendations into consideration. So just make sure that you understand the processes and the timing for that. At Global Health Council, right now, we are mobilizing our letter writing efforts for a 2026 budget. So that just gives you an idea of how important it is to really know your timelines, because you really need to think about when you need to mobilize your efforts to get that letter on time for it to actually make a difference. So I just wanted to mention timing. The other thing I wanted to say, and thank you, Waiswa, for emphasizing how important it is to get to know your audience and who your target audience is. Don't assume that that person or those group of people have the same background knowledge or understanding that we do within the global health community. We have a tendency to use a lot of acronyms. We have a tendency to assume that our leaders have an understanding of very general and basic global health data that's very much readily available. Some may have access and understanding to it, but I've found in my experience, and even at Global Health Council and meeting with various different people within our Congress in US government, that a lot of them don't actually have that very basic understanding. So just make sure that when you're writing your letters or when you're thinking about the content, that you keep that in mind. The other thing I wanted to mention, when Wiswa talked about data is incredibly important. And not only data about what the current problems are in global health or within your region or within your country or within your province or district, but also I have found in our experience at GHC that a lot of policymakers also want data on outcomes. So they also want to see how their investments can really make a difference. So when you're asking for a specific call or when you're giving a recommendation, when you're providing a solution, if there is data or information about how in the past those interventions or those investments have made a positive health impact in those communities, that is a really good sell to policymakers. So when you're looking at data, also consider that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be data that is generalizable. It can even be anecdotal data. It can be data related to a specific country or a specific province, but it can really show potential impact. And I think that is another important aspect of data. And then I was really happy too to see the mention about how important it is to collectively advocate. And I agree, you know, a collective voice is always more powerful than a single voice. But I also wanted to say that oftentimes if we don't write these letters collectively, we end up sending various different asks and different recommendations to the same people. And that can be very confusing for policymakers. And we've actually even received that feedback from policymakers where they'll say we're getting different number requests for the same things. And so it's always not only more powerful, but it's also more effective to be able to collectively come together and decide on asks or numbers that collectively you can back up and you can present to make it more effective for and easier for policymakers to advocate for those in their work. So I think we are getting to the last 5 minutes of today's presentation, and this isn't the last time that you will be able to ask questions or request support from our team. I see that we have a few emails that have been shared with you in the chat. Please take the time to write down those emails so you have people to contact as you look through the letter writing website and you start using the templates and the resources, even the data that Wiswa has presented to you. If you have any questions about it, please feel free to email. There is also a survey that we are asking everyone who's attended today to please take. So we'll consider your responses and design appropriate follow-up and support based on the survey results. So please, it should only take a few minutes. There's a link to the survey in the chat. So take a few minutes to have a look at the survey. And please provide us with your feedback and your responses. I think that I've pretty much hit everything. If you have any questions, Nina and Laura have, again, as I mentioned, put their emails in the chat. There are multiple different resources that you can use in the lead up to UHC Day. We'll be sharing all of those links in the chat, but as Nina mentioned, there will be the official UHC Day launch, which will be October 3rd. So you'll get even more information and opportunities about UHC Day then. So I think that covers everything. I will let Laura come in if I missed anything. Laura, do you have anything to add before we wrap up that I might have missed?
Yes. Thank you, Eliana. No, that was pretty complete. I think the only thing that we can add at this stage is that after the virtual launch, we will have a follow-up workshop dedicated to youth advocates, specifically on the advocacy letter template and writing skills. That will be more personalized and interactive discussion. So we'll just follow up with more information. And if you're interested in joining, you're most welcome to, and we're looking forward to see you for this following webinar too.
Great. Well, thank you to UHC 2030 and to the Civil Society Engagement Mechanism for organizing this very important webinar. And thank you to our speakers. We will be in touch with everyone. In the meantime, good luck with your advocacy. Thank you, everybody.